Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Friday, the weekend is very nearly here. I hope you're having a good one wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. As always, thank you very much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Big day today, people. Big day. Broadband, new broadband being fitted at my house. Fingers crossed. All goes well and we are back up and running and back to normal very quickly. I've been counting down. Trust me, I've been counting down the days getting to today. So fingers crossed from today onwards, from the end of today anyway, onwards, things will be back to normal. I can get back to normal. We'll be back with the extended shows, with the extra times, with the press passes, with the FPL show, all that sort of stuff. And yeah, thank you for your patience during the past couple of weeks. It's been a nightmare, and fingers crossed light at the end of the tunnel comes today. So thank you very much for that. Let's talk about Arsenal now, shall we? Press conference day. Mikel Arteta is going to be speaking a little bit later on at London Colney ahead of that game against Newcastle on Sunday. The sort of game you would say is the end of Arsenal's very tricky start to the season. We always looked at it as soon as the fixtures came out. These first 6 league games were really tough. And we're coming to the end of that now. I think how this result goes at the weekend is going to really sort of shape and determine how we viewed this start to the season. If Arsenal get 3 points there, whilst they'll still probably be some way behind Liverpool, I don't think it's the worst start to the season considering who they've played, the injuries they've had, the tough away games they've had, all that sort of taken into account. If they can win at St James's Park, I'll be fairly satisfied. I know some of you won't. And that's fine, but I think from how I sort of viewed it at the start of the season, I think I'll be fairly satisfied with how Arsenal have done and navigated this really tricky start to the season, given a lot of the context that has gone into the start of the season as well, revolving around injuries and bedding in a lot of new players as well. So I think this game is really going to determine and shape how we view this season. Lose, and then, I don't even want to think about losing. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show today. We'll look at some of the potential decisions facing Mikel Arteta for that game at St James's Park. Lots to discuss. Got a couple of comments from you guys I wanted to go over as well in sort of relation to what I was talking about yesterday and maybe the noise after results, even if Arsenal win, all that sort of stuff. So, but I wanted to start obviously on the big news. Big news that William Saliba has agreed a new contract with Arsenal. Now, at the time of recording this, that contract has not yet been signed, but it has been agreed. David breaking that story yesterday over the Athletic, obviously, and he's absolutely right. As he always is, he's right. This contract has been agreed now, and it's just a case of all the lawyer stuff, the legal stuff, contracts being signed, and it will be announced. And just fantastic news. Brilliant news. We know how important Saliba is. We know how good he is. We know how he's viewed, how he's progressed since he's been at Arsenal. We know that Real Madrid have been very keen to sign him. They've been playing all their little games behind the scenes like they always do. And I'm pretty sure they would have felt fairly confident that those little games could have worked, but they haven't. He has agreed to sign a new long-term 5-year contract with Arsenal, and that will be signed very shortly. I can't really overestimate how big that news is. I have to admit, I didn't think it was going to be done this quickly. All the noises that have been coming out of Arsenal for a while regarding Saka and Saliba, they've always been like that. We're confident this is going to happen, especially with Saka. It's a little bit more quiet around Saliba, which I admit, to me, sort of got my senses tingling a little bit. I was not worried, but I was like, why am I hearing more good things about Saka rather than Saliba? So for this to sort of be done this early, when you think last contract renewal went into the final year with Saliba, I figured it would probably go to around that time again. The fact that it hasn't, and it means we have no uncertainty. We've got no, that word uncertainty, it's the right word. We just don't have that sort of meandering on through the season as we get towards, you get to Christmas, suddenly it's 18 months left. And then if nothing's done sort of after that, and then the second half of the season when everything starts really picking up and there's so many important games to be sort of thinking about, then it always like, we'll sort it at the end of the season. Then suddenly you've got 12 months left. Then things do get uncertain. Then that could become, a disrupting thing sort of behind the scenes. We'd have heard more and more stories emerging from Madrid, as we've already heard in the last year or so, but even more would have started to emerge from the Madrid press. And, there's no doubt Real would have started using their city media the way they always do, and we'd have had to deal with it week after week, story after story. So for this to be done now, and take all of that out of the equation, it's just massive. It's such a settling thing for Arsenal, and it's just such a boost. It really, really is. And obviously, there's still Saka to go. I think, I'd be very surprised. Saliba was the one I was always worried about, not Saka. I'd be stunned if we didn't come to the same conclusion with Saka very, very quickly than we have with William Saliba. And it's just brilliant. And fair play to Andrea Berta. He's come on, he's taken hold of these negotiations since he was appointed in at the end of March. He's sorted out Gabriel straight away, sorted out Ethan, he sorted out Miles, and some of those weren't the easiest ones, especially Ethan Nwaneri to do, but he's got those over the line and he's got them done. And now he's got William Saliba, one of the big two he's got over the line, and hopefully, as I said, Saka will follow, and that's a really good thing for him. It's a really big tick on his copybook in terms of the work that he's done since he's arrived at Arsenal. And I think what it does do as well, for all the kind of, the narrative, the noise around Arsenal and how it goes, and if they don't win trophies soon, all this squad's going to break up and they're going to leave because they're going to want to sign, they're going to want to win trophies, all that sort of stuff. This kind of shows that's all rubbish, to be fair, because Gabriel signed a new contract. William Saliba, the guy who every single club in the world would have wanted and that Real Madrid would have wanted, were trying to pull their usual shenanigans with, has signed his new contract. The whole squad have signed up. That's not a squad that doesn't believe in this. I don't want to call it a project anymore because it's not a project. The project phase is done. We're beyond that. We're just in the here and now when it comes to Arsenal. But they still believe, clearly, and that's why they're committing their futures to the club, that they still believe they can win what they want to win. They can achieve what they want to achieve here. The belief is still there. It's not waning at all. And I think that's a really good sign as well for where Arsenal are right now. So brilliant. Can't wait for this to be announced. I don't think Mikel's going to speak about it at his press conference later. He'll be asked about it, no doubt about that, but he'll do the usual card that he always does when it comes to transfers of contracts, when can't really say anything until it's official. We're trying, all that sort of stuff. He said it the other day. He said, these two players, Saka and William Saliba, absolutely wanted to stay. I think he'll stick with that rather than doing any sort of confirmation himself. We'll wait for the pictures to come out. And like I said, it's not even been signed yet, or certainly as far as I'm aware at the time of recording this, it has not even been signed yet. But yeah, massive boost. As you can tell, I'm absolutely delighted. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below, what you believe this is, how big a statement is this to work Andrea Berta has done. Let me know in the comments below. Okay, moving on to this weekend's game. Obviously, the match against Newcastle. Huge game, no doubt about it. Massive game, taking on really extra importance after, I think, the draw against Manchester City. It'd be a game that would be very handy for Arsenal to win, obviously, for many, many reasons. Martin Odegaard's fitness is going to be obviously very, very important to that. We'll find out a little bit more from Mikel Arteta later on at the press conference in terms of Odegaard. When you think of the press conference he gave before the Port Vale game, where he said, look, Odegaard's already been training. He said it would be a matter of days. If he was being absolutely truthful there, and if by training he meant, training with the group, then there shouldn't be any issue here. You would imagine he was just held back against Port Vale. Why risk him in that sort of game? All eyes on Newcastle. And if Odegaard's fit, then he plays. Obviously, he starts against Newcastle. There's no doubt about that. And that kind of solves the midfield. Or I think it will probably, if Odegaard's fit, it will be a nice thing for Mikel, because it kind of means that the question of what he's going to do in midfield doesn't need to be asked or doesn't materialise. Because I still think he would fancy Zubimendi, Rice and Marino as the midfield at St James's Park for exactly the same reasons he fancied it against Manchester City, and he fancied it in the Champions League as well. Obviously, the way the game panned out against Man City, that midfield became very, very redundant because Man City played in a way that no one expected Manchester City to play. But Newcastle, we know what that's going to be like. It's in James's Park. It's going to be an absolute battle. It's going to be a war. It tends to be. That's how those games go, or certainly recent games have gone at St James's Park. So I think for Arteta, the temptation to go with that midfield would still be there. Is it the midfield that I want to see? No, it is not. But in terms of how Arteta views things and what he might do, I think the temptation would be there. So if Odegaard's fit, that kind of takes the temptation out of it. And I, for one, would be happy with that. I know most of you would be happy with that as well. And I also do think that, the way Arsenal have approached these games at St James's Park in the last few years, it hasn't worked out. They've barely even created a chance, let alone scored a goal. So I think maybe the approach of trying to counter Newcastle's physicality and their aggression with kind of physicality of your own. It hasn't really worked at St James's Park for Arsenal. You know what? Comfortable defeat there in the semi-final last season. 1-0 defeat there in the league. The previous season, 1-0 defeat there in the league. I think the last time Arsenal had a good result at St James's Park when I was there, and my God, that was such a tough afternoon. But the way they countered it that day, they played Jorginho, which was a surprise. He started him in that game. I remember sitting in the press room, I was like, oh my God, Jorginho, with his legs are not going to be able to cope with this game. But he was brilliant that day, and Arsenal won. They sort of managed to start playing football despite everything that Newcastle were trying to do and the type of game they were trying to create. Arsenal managed to start playing football in that game, and they won 2-0. Odegaard scored, and there was an own goal as well from Martinelli getting in down the left. So when I think back to that game, the last time Arsenal won at St James's Park, maybe that is the way to go this weekend. Don't try and match Newcastle for their aggression and physicality. Try and play the football that this squad can play. We know they can play. They've got the players that can play it. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Mikel does in terms of starting 11s as well. You know, if Odegaard comes in, I fully expect it'll be Zubimendi, Odegaard and Rice. It's then what do you do on the left-hand side? Do you play Martinelli? Do you play Eze? I mean, Trossard started against Manchester City. I don't think Trossard will start again this game, but I said that against Man City as well, and Mikel surprised me there. So lots of questions for Arteta to answer. He's going to have to answer them in the press conference later on today, no doubt about it. I'm sure he'll be asked about everything that I've just discussed there. I think the rest of the team basically picks itself unless there's some injuries that we don't quite know about. You know, it'll be Raya in goal. I think Jurriën Timber will obviously come in for Ben White at right back. You'll have Saliba, Gabriel. I think Calafiori comes back in for Miles Lewis-Skelly. Then, as I said, Zubimendi, if Odegaard's fit, him and Rice. And then, Saka, Gyökeres and probably Eze, maybe Martinelli on the left-hand side. So we'll get questions about that at the press conference. It'll be interesting to hear his response to the sort of ongoing negativity, I suppose, around Arsenal, noise, whatever you want to call it. And there's been plenty of that. All the pundits have been having their say, which is... I looked on News Now Arsenal yesterday, and I didn't even start scrolling down. I saw about, if you're not aware of News Now, it's this kind of aggregation website that pulls in stories from across the sort of main national media over here, and sort of lists the headlines, and then you sort of can click on it and it takes you off to that story. And so it's basically that. It's a news aggregation website for news stories that have been published in the national medias over here. And honestly, I looked at it. I didn't even scroll down. I looked at like the first 10 titles of stories that have been pulled in by News Now in the space of the last 30 minutes. Four of them were stories that were created from quotes made by either Gary Neville, Jamie Carragher, or Roy Keane. 4 out of 10 in the space of the last 30 minutes. I was just like, what? Why? Why is that the story? Obviously, it works because these websites and everything are doing it because they know it's clearly getting them clicks. So they're telling the reporters on there, keep writing this story, keep writing that story. But it's just like, surely there's better stuff to do your content on than that. And I've fallen into that trap before. I've spoken about Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville far too much in this, but sometimes I just get caught up in it. But you know, there's been lots of noise this week about Arsenal play, so there's going to be lots of focus on this game against Newcastle, no doubt about it. Mikel's been spiking his press conferences before. It'll be interesting to see how he sort of navigates it a little bit later on today. I was talking about the noise around Arsenal following the game in the Cup at Port Vale yesterday. I spoke about it quite extensively in my show about how I kind of felt about it and how almost I was going to kind of struggle to enjoy this season or let myself enjoy this season because it's just all I'm seeing at the moment. It feels like even if Arsenal win, it's not enough. It needs to be 5-0, 6-0 and all that sort of stuff. And how I maybe needed to sort of try and take a step back from it just to be able to enjoy the season the way I want to try and enjoy the season and see the season through the way of my eyes, the way I want to see it, rather than a lot of the sort of stuff and the content and everything that's getting sort of pushed onto me from various angles at the moment. So lots of you, there was loads of responses to it yesterday. You can have a look at it, and in the comments to the video, you'll see what there's been lots of various opinions on what I said and from different people about how they're sort of viewing things at the moment. There's a couple of the ones I just wanted to talk about. AFC Cape Town got in touch. Thanks for your message. Said, you need to look back at the last 3 seasons and ask yourselves why we didn't win. These performances this season are just reminding us of those seasons. Last season, poor start. It's too early. Set piece FC, we're too reliant on set pieces to open scoring. This season, we've not started well. And again, we're not creating enough chances outside of set pieces. When I look back at the last 3 seasons, we didn't win. The first of those 3 seasons, I think the reasons we didn't win was just because we were totally inexperienced, and no one expected us to get into the position that we got ourselves into, and we couldn't get it. We couldn't see it over the line because no one had been in that situation before. The manager certainly hadn't. The players certainly hadn't. I think that caught up with us against an unbelievable Manchester City team that season that won the treble that year. The season after that, I don't think Arsenal did anything wrong, really, in terms of, they broke all records that they could have set in terms of club records that season. It was an unbelievable season. The second half of it was a type of run I've just not seen Arsenal do before. But again, they just came up 1 point short against an amazing Manchester City team. Last season was different. Last season was disappointing, no doubt about it. There was huge reasons why Arsenal weren't able, in my view, to be able to compete last season. And the injuries were just front and centre of that. I just felt the injuries were just there was too much. I just didn't see a way Arsenal could compete, certainly for the league title last season, because of those injuries. I agree this season we've not started great in terms of football. I didn't enjoy the game against Port Vale particularly much, but I didn't really, at the end of it, I was just like, I don't really care. That was just a win, move on game for me. It wasn't one that I sat down thinking, I've got to see Arsenal play brilliant here to get through. It was just a case of don't lose to this League One side to me. Don't let yourself be a giant killing, and they did just that. Japan and China, a different country, it's a brilliant name, says, you are wrong, Charles. Yes, the win is important, but how you win is also key. Arteta is sucking the joy and creativity out of this side. Players are scared to progress the ball forward. You can see it, pass back, pass back, pass back. I love watching Arsenal, but full 90 minutes this style is actually torture. Do you really feel like that? Again, it wasn't fun on Tuesday night or Wednesday night, whenever it was, Wednesday night. It wasn't fun. But the rest of this season, is it really been that bad? That's what I'm saying. Has it really been that bad to sort of justify the level of noise we're seeing at the moment? And that, your comment there saying it's actually torture. 2 weeks ago, I came out of the Emirates after Arsenal had beaten Nottingham Forest 3-0, absolutely buzzing because it had been a great day. Arsenal played lovely football. They scored some really good goals. The time before that, I came out of the Emirates, Arsenal just beaten Leeds 5-0. Again, a brilliant day, thoroughly enjoyed. The other games are out there. There's contacts. So you're away at Liverpool. Liverpool played no better than Arsenal that day. They didn't play in any sort of more attacking way, really, than Arsenal did that day. Away at Old Trafford. Last week was against Manchester City side, a Man City side that are so scared of Arsenal, seemingly they went against every principle that they've got and played super, super defensive. Fair play to them, it nearly worked. So I just don't think it's that level of, even in that comment. 90 minutes this style is actually torture. I've been to 3 home games this season, and I've loved 2 of them. And the other one was against Manchester City, and Arsenal didn't quite. It did, I don't think Arteta got things right. He changed it, and they were still the better team by distance, in my view. But 2 out of 3 home games I've absolutely loved, and I've seen Arsenal score 9 goals in those 3 home games. They've scored fewer goals than Liverpool this season, and they've only conceded 2 goals this season. It's not that bad in my view, but I know everyone can watch things and view things differently. I get that, but I just feel the level of noise and negativity, it just outweighs what's actually happening in my view. But I kind of felt like this was always the way this season was going to go because of the narrative of must win, all that sort of stuff, no excuses, all that sort of narrative. I kind of felt that any single drop point, any single underwhelming performance like we saw against Port Vale is just going to be amplified 100 times over. And at the moment, my thoughts going into this season have been proven correct. But anyway, that's it from me today, everyone. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the start of your weekend, wherever you are around the world. I'll be back tomorrow to do it all over again, hopefully with a new broadband installed, hopefully working very well. Hopefully I'll be back using StreamYard. I'll have the slides back to make it the presentation a little bit prettier, rather than you having to look at this purely at this ugly face for the entire time. Fingers crossed it all works out. Have a good one, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.